Hey guys, welcome back to a new video, and in this video I'm gonna show you how you can use Koin Annotations to provide dependencies in your Android project. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So first thing first, you should go my GitHub repository, download the project and open up into your Android Studio. Link present in the description box. So this is the basic project. Open up your build.kts module app level file. At the bottom you have to add all this dependency, and this is the dependency for annotation. Okay, on the top we have two plugins, serialization plugin and KSP plugin. Similarly, if you open up your root level Gradle file, we have two different plugin, serialization plugin and KSP plugin. Okay, so now it's time to go through the project. So this is our project, and this is a clean architecture project. We have data layer, domain layer and our presentation layer, which in here we name view. So in the data layer we have our auth repository implementation. So overall it's a basic authentication feature. In our domain layer we have authentication repository interface, and its implementation will be given by our data layer over here. We have use cases in our domain layer, get username use case, and the requirement of this thing is authentication repository. In this we have a one operator function invoke that we were using in authentication view model. So in the authentication view model, here you can see we have one mutable state flow which actually used to hold our state, and at the bottom we have data class that is actually used to hold our state. We have here get data function which uses our use case and update our UI state corresponding to the events that we were receiving from the use case. So this is a very basic project structure. So first let's set up our Koin dependency injection framework in our project. So for that we require a base application. This is a class. This class extend application. In our application we have lifecycle event on create, and in this on create just use start Koin function. Register your Android context inits, this @ base application. Now it's time to register our base application in manifest. So go to your manifest, in the application tag use name property and register your base application. So this is a very basic setup. Now it's time to create few modules. Main purpose of module is it's our duty to tell Koin dependency injection framework the way how to create the objects. So we can do this thing within the module. So let's do that. So in our data layer, I'm going to create a class, and the class name is data module. Okay, this is a class. If you want to create this class data module as a module for Koin dependency injection framework, you should annotate this thing with module annotation. Now in this I'm going to create a function provide auth repository. A return type of this function is auth repository, because auth repository is an interface. So we can't create object of our authentication repository, but we can provide its implementation. Now its implementation is given by authentication repository implementation class. So let's use it. Return authentication repository implementation. Now use here annotation factory. So factory is equivalent to factory DSL. Similarly we have here singleton or single. Now this will eventually represent your single DSL, and similarly we have one more scope. So we'll see everything. For the time being just use factory for the data module. Alright, next domain layer. Now in the domain layer we have get username use case, and the requirement of this use case is authentication repository. Now our Koin DI will know how to create authentication repository implementation. So yes, our DI is able to inject this thing in the use case. But if you open up your view model, requirement of view model is username use case. So let's provide this in a module. So in the domain layer I'm going to create one more class, naming is domain module. Use annotation module, and here I'm going to create a function which actually used to provide a username use case. Get username use case, return get username use case, and requirement of this thing is authentication repository. So simply pass authentication repository. Okay, so use here factory. Now our Koin DI framework knew how to inject use case in our view model. So now suppose you want to create an object of your authentication view model in your activity. So let's do that. So here I'm gonna create view model. Type of this thing is authentication view model. So you can initialize this thing with the help of get view model function. Okay, so now we are able to initialize our view model, but the thing is in your get view model we have to inject get username use case. So for that, you should annotate this thing with Koin ViewModel. Now Koin ViewModel will eventually find all of the dependencies that your ViewModel require and it will inject it properly. So just use Koin ViewModel annotation. Like in Dagger we use hilt ViewModel. Here we have Koin ViewModel. Alright, so go to your main activity and here we have our ViewModel. It's time to use our UI state. ViewModel UI state collect as state which attached to the lifecycle. Okay, so this isn't composable. We can't use this thing over here. So remove it from here and use in our Koin dependency injection theme. Now it's time to create all of our UI. So let's do that. If our UI state is loading is true, on that case I'm going to create a box having modifier fill max size and its content alignment is on the center. Because it's a loading case, I am going to show a circular progress indicator. Next we have error state. So UI state error is not blank. On that case, again I'm going to create a box modifier fill max size, its content alignment is on the center, that contain a basic text which actually used to show us the error. Lastly, this success event. So UI state data, if it is not null, that means we are receiving our data. So on the bottom, if you can see, we have here greeting function. So let's use it. Greeting in place of name, I'm gonna pass the name that we were receiving from our use case, which is Himanshu. And yeah, we are pretty much done, but we forgot to use this inner padding. So let's use it. In the modifier, add padding and simply pass your inner padding, copy this stuff, paste in here and in our greeting too. So modifier padding, inner padding. Yeah, we are pretty much done. Now it's time to execute the application. Alright, so we haven't attached our module in Koin dependency injection framework. So let's do that. For that, go to your base application and here use modules. Now Koin will automatically create few extension over module classes. So let's see data module. We have here module. If you want to see this module, you can go to the generated code base. See data module. If you open it up, data module.module. So it's an extension over data module class. So here at the top, we are having the module DSL that we were using to create object previously. It did the same thing, but because we are using annotation, it's very easy for us to, provide dependency. But under the hood, it will do the same task that we were doing initially. Okay, so this is for the data module. This is for the domain module. Module instance, provide username. You can see factory. So basically under the hood, it uses the same approach. So you should add this default one because this default module is actually used to create your view models. So let's add everything in our base application module. So we have added data module. It's time to add our domain module. Lastly, we have our default module. Now re-execute our application. Okay, so here you can see hello Himanshu Gaur. Now this Himanshu Gaur is coming from our authentication repository implementation, as you can see over here. All right, so now it's time to see how we can use scopes in annotations. So let's get started. For that, in the view, I'm going to create one class and the class name is UI module. So this is a class and I'm going to use module annotation. Now in this, on the top, I'm going to create a data class and the data class name is session manager. We have session naming string variable in it. Now I want to inject my session manager only in the main activity. How we can restrict its scope? So for that, first let me create a function provide session manager. Return type of this function is session manager. Return session manager, and in the session I'm gonna call this this is session. Cool. So let's use the scope. Now if you want to restrict this thing in the main activity, so use main activity class and scoped. That's it. So just rebuild your project and use this UI module in your base application module. So UI module. And when you open up its implementation, you can see scope is main activity, and it uses scoped to create our session manager. Alright, so let's see how you can use it. So go to your main activity. So first thing first, in the main activity we have to use Android scope component. Now this Android scope component contains two different things. First is the variable, second is a function that actually used to free the memory. So let's use both. Go to your main activity. Here on the top I'm gonna override scope. Initialize this scope from activity scope. This activity scope is an extension over component activity. We have two approaches to create a scope. First is activity scope, second one is activity written scope. The main difference between activity scope and the activity written scope is activity written scope will eventually protect your scope when your configuration change from portrait to landscape. So if you want to use that, you can do that. It's not a big deal. Alright, so we do have our scope. It's time to perform injection. So private variable session manager, type of this thing is session manager, and use here simple inject. Now it's time to use session manager to see whether it is injected or not. So for that, in the greeting I'm using my session manager dot session, and in the on destroy you can use on close scope to release the memory. Alright, so let's execute it. So it works. So by using this approach you can create a scope. Now it's time to see how we can create custom scopes. So for that, first I'm gonna create a class, and the class name is user scope. Okay, so this is a normal class. Now below to it I'm gonna create a data class, and the data class name is user that has a name property in it. Alright, so now I want to use a custom scope which is user scope to inject this user into my main activity. So let's see how we can do it. So for that, go to your UI module, and in the UI module again I'm using scope. Now this time I'm using my user scope class. This is a custom scope. All right, next we have scoped function provide user. A return type of this function is a user. Let's create an object of user. In place of name I am passing my name, which is Himanshu Kaur. Alright, so yeah, now we are able to inject this thing in our main activity. So go to your main activity, and here if you want to inject the user, first we have to create a private latent variable type of user. Okay, now initialize this user. So for that we have to create a custom scope, and the custom scope name is user scope. Type of this thing is scope, of course. Initialize this thing with get Koin. Make sure this get Koin is non-composable. Dot create scope, and in its type you can pass user scope. Now by using this user scope you can inject your user. So in this on create I am going to initialize my user from user scope dot get, and make sure to mention the type, which is user. It's time to use the user in our greetings to see whether it is injected or not. So let's see our user dot name in here, and lastly when we done everything, release the memory. User scope dot close. Launch the application. Alright, here you can see it works. Now open up your generated code base. In the UI module, if you see, this time it uses the user scope, scoped, and provide the user. So now it's time to discuss few other things that you should know. So first, open up your ViewModel. Let's say I want to inject here user. Okay, but I want to inject this user at runtime. So if you want to do that, you can use here inject params. Cool. Now go back to your main activity. So first thing first, I'm gonna remove this user scope. Okay, at the bottom I will remove this user scope dot close. Now here I'm creating my view model. So in this, if you press Ctrl P, you are going to see qualifier, extra producers, parameters holder. So let's use a lambda, and in this lambda I'm gonna provide my user runtime. So parameter of, I'm gonna inject user, and the name of user is let's say Ramu. Now use this view model user over here in the greetings, user dot name. Okay, so make user public so that it is available over here. Cool. Execute the application to see whether it is injected dynamically or not. It works. So by using this approach, you can inject your dependencies at runtime, not in the view model, I mean in every place. Okay, so let's see how we can use lazy initialization. So for that, I'm going to make some changes in my username use case. So I want to inject my authentication repository lazily. So if you want to do that, you can use here lazy and wrap this thing in this lazy. So if you want to use authentication repository, now you can use this thing by using dot value. Cool. Let's see the generated code. Clean the project and rebuild it. Okay, so here we have a problem, and the problem is a requirement of this thing is lazy, but we are passing auth repository. Yeah, it is the problem. So let's make this thing a lazy and use, yes, it's fine. So clean the project and rebuild it. Okay, so build is successful. Now open up your generated code base. This is our domain module. So open up domain module, and here you can see a little difference. This time it won't use get, it use inject, because get will used when you want to inject your dependency eagerly. Inject is used when you want to initialize your object lazily. So this is the difference between them. So if you want to do this lazy initialization, you can use lazy and wrap your dependency in it. So yeah, by using this you can actually perform the lazy initialization of your objects. Now we are going to discuss a name qualifier that is actually used to make differentiator between the same type of objects. So let's see with a practical example. In our UI module, I'm going to create two more function factory, and here I'm going to use named annotation, and in this I'm using the key first. So function provide string return first string. Similarly, I'm going to create one more factory function which provide second string. This time I'm using here qualifier named and call this second. Cool. And now it's time to perform injection, because the return type of this thing is string, and in order to make a differentiator we were using here a named qualifier. So let's see these two things in our main activity. So in order to perform injection, I'm using here private while my first string, type of this thing is string, and I'm going to perform injection. Now in this you can pass your qualifier. So qualifier name is named first. Okay, just duplicate this thing, and this time I'm gonna use second. Now in our greeting I'm gonna use both. So first string plus second string. Execute your application. See, hello first string, hello second string. Now what will happen if I remove this qualifier? So remove this thing from here and here too. In our UI module, just remove this. Execute your application one more time. Here you can see, now this time we are receiving second string, because our Koin dependency injection is not able to make differentiator between provide first string and provide second string. We have one more annotation which is component scan. So this is actually used to scan our component. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you like this video. I cover pretty much everything that you should know about Koin annotation. So if you like this video, subscribe my channel and also write your comments. We'll meet in our next video where we will discuss something new about Android. Till that, goodbye.